Welcome to the podcast that's designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lupresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are on this week coming back to a favorite track here that's gaining some popularity, Business Blueprints, Lessons from Leaders. On with us today, as you can see, we've got Mr. Bob Healey, Chief Commercial Officer from Prelude Solutions. Bob, thanks for joining, man.
Thank you, Josh. It's a pleasure. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Bob, maybe kick us off, right? For anybody that doesn't know you, give us a little bit about kind of your, we'll get to the company here. We'll get to Prelude in a second, but
Yeah.
just give us a little bit about your personal journey, anything unique, any weird twists, or just what's your story kind of getting to this point?
Yep. So there's always weird twists, right? We all have weird twists. But I've been in the industry for longer than I care to admit, and came out of school with a English journalism degree, right? And wanted to write for newspapers, and was fortunate enough to have a byline in the Sunday Inquirer, Philadelphia Sunday Inquirer, many years ago. And once I had that article published, I stayed up all night. I bought like 15 copies at 6 in the morning, and then I quit the next day because I was working for $5 an hour writing articles, and that's not what I wanted to do. And I kind of got into sales begrudgingly. When I was working at the Inquirer, my college roommate helped me get a kind of part-time job at a paging company, and the regional manager there kind of forced me into sales against my will because I didn't think I'd be good at it or I would enjoy it. And turns out I was wrong. I think I am good at it, and I very much enjoy it. So it's been rewarding over that now 30 plus year run. And Prelude is 3 years at Prelude now. Kate Heeman, who's our founder and CEO, her and I worked together 6 years ago, and always remained friends and got back together a few years ago.
I love it. It's funny how I love a good winding story. I think what you find out is I've maybe had one person on in the 140 some episodes that we've done that has said, I knew right out of college, I want to
Yeah.
do this. I stayed on that path. I'm still doing that. Here we are, 30 years later. It's just
Yeah.
life has funny ways of working out. We discover
Yeah.
all these things, and it's just about kind of finding yourself, what makes you happy. And I used to think that stuff was really cliche. Turns out it's all true.
Right. Yeah,
But
that's right.
uh
Yeah, there was one point where I was probably 27 years old. And my dad was a cement mason when I was growing up, so I always had that in my blood and always did that work. High school and college. And when I was 27, I got 6 months. If I'm not happy in this role, I'm gonna join the cement masons union. So I was close to giving up, but things worked out, and I stayed with it. Head down, hard work, and it was rewarding. So.
love it. All right, so let's get back to Prelude then.
Mhm.
Talk us through what sets Prelude apart in the industry. Kind of how do you guys
Yeah.
stand out, and just give us a little bit about overview of Prelude.
Yeah, sure. So one of the core premises I have is agencies, technology advisors, we're all 90% the same, right? And there's a 10% difference. So we try and focus on what is that difference. And at the end of the day, what does that difference really mean to a potential client or to a client? So, like many agencies, we have our specialty. We do specialize in TEM and expense management, but our real difference, our secret sauce, is we will do audits and optimizations of existing services and existing spend. So it really becomes a good entry point for us. There's not always a cycle that you have to wait to come due on terms and things on those lines. And it's helped us get into the Fortune 1000 space because the starting point is, let us optimize what you have today, and optimize and reduce cost doesn't mean switching providers. It might mean reterm, it might mean consolidation of contracts, consolidation of providers. So that really does become our difference. And then, from a people perspective, we're, 15, 16 people, but we have very good people with a lot of industry experience. So, we say we know what to look for, we know how to look for it, and we know where to look for it. And that really becomes our differentiator.
Awesome. All right, let's. This is about lessons from leaders, right? So let's talk about first one. I want to kick us off with some leadership philosophy questions for you. So,
Mhm.
core principles that kind of define your leadership style, and really, how have they shaped the growth culture of the company?
Yeah. So when it comes to leadership, and I try not to think of myself as a leader, but more as, a piece of a larger puzzle, right? And kind of lead by example and lead with others together. But for me, whether it's leadership or other aspects, it really comes down to just core basic human characteristics, right? It comes down to sincerity and being genuine, have an understanding of the other person's situation, where EQ comes in. Being kind, right? Being supportive, being educational, but also holding myself to account so I can then be accountable to others. And then vice versa. I want others to be accountable to themselves first so they can then be accountable to the business. And I really stress that a lot is that accountability first to yourself because you can't be accountable to someone else if you're not accountable to yourself.
Isn't it funny, these seemingly basic things that you talk about, accountability, leading by example. I don't know. I had this perception kind of growing up that everybody did these things.
Hmm.
Everybody would know these things. People would treat people nice. But I mean, it's crazy that those are the things that set you apart, because people just don't do them, and they don't.
Yeah,
Uh, there's just such opportunity there, right?
there is, and I think it comes down to part of it is societal, right? We've become more isolationist, both as as in some ways as a country, as individual people. With COVID just exacerbated so many, either exasperated or accelerated so many different aspects of society. But at the end of the day, when people look back at their life, there are going to be certain things that you remember and certain things that you wish you could have done differently. And if you can look back and just say, I did things right and the best I could, even if it didn't always work out to my benefit, that's a better way to live in my mind.
I like it. Along kind of down that journey, any great mentors or any lessons learned the hard way? Anything there?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'm a lead by example person.
Yeah.
And I've also learned the most, I think, by the examples of others, right? I'm not a rah-rah guy. I'm not going to be the biggest cheerleader. We get a big win. I'm like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I know that's not always the best way. So I have to bring myself into that celebratory mood sometimes to make sure that we do focus on and consistently remind ourselves about the wins, even if they're little every day. So our mindset's in a good spot. But I'm a lead by example person, and years ago, it's someone who as you get older, you might talk to your good friends sometimes once a year, but they're still your good friends, right? So one of my good friends, Brian Love, when I was 24, maybe 23, I happened to sit next to him at the office, and I just looked at him, and I'm like, I'm going to do everything he does because he was the top producer. And the way he wrote in his calendar, I did, the way he color coordinated things, I did. And I just watched him and I'm like, that is what I want to be. And yeah, we became good friends. I helped him get a job. He helped me get a job subsequently, after that first experience together. And, I've always harkened back to things I learned from him. And every once in a while, I'll send him a text and just say, hey, quoted you again today. Or, talked about you again today, just to remind him how much I appreciate the impact he had on me when we were, much younger.
That's cool. I like that. All right, let's talk about hard. Let's talk about hard challenges. Any major strategic challenge companies faced or innovative
Yeah,
strategies? Kind of how'd you overcome it?
yeah, sure. So one of the biggest challenges we had this year, 2024, was at the end of 2023, going into the year, we decided we wanted to adopt a scaling up model for growth, right? And the headline of scaling up, it's similar to EOS if you're not familiar with it, but the headline is it's just constant prioritization of work and reprioritization of work. And everyone's familiar with the SWOT methodology. Well, this one says throw away your weaknesses and throw away your threats and just focus on your strength and your opportunities. And within there, prioritize the work. And I probably 80% agree with that because I think you should still be aware of the threats in the market and you should still be aware of your weaknesses to try and improve. But that core mindset of focus on your strength and do more of what you do well, I do agree with. And implementing that when you have not had a methodology before is not easy, right? When you're asking people to be accountable to a larger business plan that has growth tied to it, not everyone is able to do that. So as we rolled out the scaling up model and as we implemented the work and as we held ourselves accountable, not everybody at the organization was in tune with that approach, and not everyone in the organization could keep up with that pace and that methodology. So there was some changes we went through with some people who had been here for a while, and that's not always easy, especially in a small company. But again, going back to treat people with, the basic human characteristics that are good in people, treat people well, be kind to them, help elevate them, help educate them, help teach them, but also hold them accountable,
Yeah.
and then sometimes help people move on. So that's not always easy. That was a core challenge, but we went through it together as a group. I think it made us stronger. And in the end, everyone looks back and says that was the right thing for everybody, the right decision and the right move for everybody. And everyone's probably in a better spot, now that we went through that.
Good. I like that.
Mm.
I mean, I think you're kind of laying the foundation a little bit. You mentioned, EOS and just this fundamental new way to prioritize,
Mhm.
reprioritize. Is there anything different that you add to dial in this kind of culture of innovation? How does that?
Yes. So, we're not a product, we're an agency,
Right.
right? So there's not technical innovation that we would provide, but something that we've started doing this year. And I would argue that Prelude may be the most well-rounded of any agency in the Telarus universe. When we go through our QBRs, there's a chart that shows the overall universe of agencies and where their breakdown of services are sold. And you look at Preludes, and it almost mirrors Telarus as a whole. Right. So we're proud of that. That means we are well-rounded. We're selling services in all areas. Um, but what we've also identified is we have a specialty in TEM. We have a specialty in expense management. So a lot of agencies, similar to us, like we have that specialty. They have a specialty in cybersecurity, maybe in disaster recovery, and no one really needs help with UCAS or CCAS or, network. But if we can partner with other agencies to help elevate each of us, let us bring in another partner agency when there's a core cybersecurity opportunity because we're okay in that discussion, but we're not the subject matter experts. And then vice versa, bring Prelude in, bring us in when you have an expense management opportunity. We can help teach your team. You can teach our team cyber. We all learn together. We split the revenue, and then eventually we're each out on our own doing more. So that's an ad. I think that's innovative. Right?
Yeah.
It certainly is new.
Yes.
And it's been, we have a few additional, not additional, we have a few partners in the agencies in the Telarus universe that we're starting to work with here, and it's been well received. So we're looking forward to doing more of that, the next couple of years for sure.
It's good. I like it. Yeah, there's no shortage of customer opportunity out there. That's for sure.
There
It's
is
a
not.
high
And
tide raises all boats, or
yep,
whatever the phrase is.
yep, yeah, yeah, yeah. Rising tide. Yeah, rising tide raises all shit. Yep. Um, the other thing I think the last, I don't know, call it's a little bit before COVID. Certainly COVID probably accelerated it. But the partner community, the channel community is so much more entrenched in so many more customers than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the old Malcolm Gladwell book of uh uh
Outliers?
no, not Outliers, the one where you make a big change. I'll think of it as we talk. Um, but that's what happened. Like there was a tipping point, the tipping
Oh,
point. There was
tipping
a
point. Yeah,
tipping
yeah, yeah.
point, where many of the providers, many of the vendors who prior were anti-channel, some of them cried uncle, and some of them just realized there's a better model here that we can tap into.
Yeah.
And we can gain tremendous scale by leveraging, the partner community. So I think that's been a good increase in the community the last 10, 11 years. And it's been significant. It's been very significant.
Agree. All right, all right, I'm a new entrepreneur. I'm just starting out. Any any key advice as I'm trying to build my business, for the partners that are listening to this and maybe just
Mhm.
became partners? What's your kickoff advice there?
Yeah, I think so. That's a good question. And my headline statement there would be just trust yourself. Like if you're taking that initiative to start an agency, to go out on your own, there's always risk involved. Family dynamics come into play, but just trust yourself, trust your drive, and do the work, right? Put the work in, do the work, and you'll be successful. The other thing, whether you're an entrepreneur or just I think everybody is it's okay to fail and it's okay to struggle, but you have to learn from
Yeah.
it, right? You have to make progress. Every conversation has to move you forward. And sometimes even internally, when we're reviewing, call it discussions with a vendor where something maybe didn't go the way we wanted, I might press a point more than is needed. And I'll tell the team internally, this is about the next one. We've already lost X, but this conversation, I want to make a point about the next one and the next one. So we're kind of in the vendor's mindset, so to speak. So I think that's important as well, is always be looking ahead. Um, and then the other, I only learned this a few years ago. But there's the DISC methodology, right? And you kind of profile what type of person someone is. And a friend of a friend wrote a book called Taken Flight, and he puts the DISC methodology into birds, so it's a little bit easier to remember. And the biggest thing was about being a chameleon and having to adapt to each personality type. But what I really took from his book, Merritt Rosenberg's his name, what I really took from his book was the golden rule is not the golden rule, right? Don't treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Treat people the way they want to be treated.
Mhm.
And Josh might want to be treated different than Bob. Josh may want you to highlight him in front of others and, express how good he did. But Bob might be embarrassed by that and not want that attention.
Yeah.
So understanding what people want, and just because you want something or think one way or like a certain style doesn't mean others do. So just trying to adapt there. So
Good.
that's a lot.
No,
But
I like those.
yeah, yeah.
Those are really good. One of the things too that last time I asked a question similar to this that to a partner, what surprised me a little bit when I said, what's one of your kind of lessons learned or heart,
Hmm.
mentor or whatever, and he said the best lesson that I learned came from a gigantic deal that I lost because I will
Hmm.
never forget all the things that went wrong in that, and that will never happen again because
Yeah.
it was all within my control, and we just kind
Hmm.
of missed some things.
Yeah.
So it's
And somewhat similar, but a core premise of my mindset is don't believe your own BS, right? And especially don't believe the BS others feed you, right? It's, undertone there is humility, right? But even when things are good, don't think that you're so good that you don't have to do the work. When opportunities are coming your way, don't think that you're so special that, that wave will continue. Like you have to do the work every day. And when people are telling you how great you are or how wonderful your business is, if you buy into that too much and believe the hype, so to speak, you could set yourself up for complacency and that set yourself up for failure. So that's another kind of core headline is just don't believe your own BS.
It is true too. I mean, you read all that stuff that talks about you become like the top five people you surround yourself with, good or bad.
Hmm.
But I think over time in life too, you learn whose opinion you can really trust,
Hmm.
and some have a Machiavellian agenda, and others just are good people but have really bad advice and bad
Yeah,
judgment. So you learn
sure.
that circle kind of just gets a little smaller over time to go, okay, tried and
Hmm.
true. You might not tell me what I need to know, but if I solicit it from you, I know it's going to be gold. And so you're
Yeah,
right. That's a great reminder.
yeah.
Constantly just check yourself, I
Hmm.
guess.
And there's plenty, whether it's, our CEO Kate, our COO Mike, or if there's just friends in the industry. I want, and I wish political discussions would happen this way, but in a healthy manner, I want someone to challenge my opinion
Yeah.
because I want to either validate what I'm thinking is right or thinking my strategy or approach is right, or I want to educate myself and change my opinion. And I will, especially with Kate, I will purposely argue the other side of what she's thinking 9 times out of 10 just to make sure that we're thinking it through together the right way.
Yeah.
And she does the same for me. So, there's a point where we know the other is arguing something they don't necessarily believe.
Yeah.
But if you do it in a good manner and it's healthy, you really do help each other come to a better conclusion. And it might be changing your opinion, or it might just be validating what you already thought was the case.
It's funny you say that. We heard this morning put a way that I've maybe not ever heard it before, and I think this is what gets lost on the political side of things
Hmm.
is that when you come at somebody, when person A comes at person B thinks they're just coming at them personally. You're not attacking the person, you're attacking the idea. And I think a lot of people have a hard time separating that.
Yeah.
And the defense mechanisms go up and how dare you and this is
Yeah.
my thing. But if we can back up, separate the idea from the person, oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a gold mine right there.
Yeah. And where did I this was recent. I heard this, and I can't recall where it was, like in the last 2 weeks. And it was along this line, but the conversation was, oh, I know what it was. I went to an event that was focused on men's health, suicide prevention, and prostate cancer awareness. And the discussion was about mental health. And the person speaking said, if somebody is suffering from, mental illness or a mental challenge, maybe they're, depressed, right? They have depression. Don't say they're depressed. Say they have depression. The same way you would say so and so isn't cancer. You don't say so and so is cancer. You would say so and so has cancer.
Yeah.
So if you can separate the disorder, the disease, whatever term is appropriate from the person, it does make it a healthier conversation. And I don't know that I ever thought about it that way because I think instinctively it would flow from the tongue to say,
Yeah.
so and so is bipolar, as opposed to so and so suffers from
Yeah.
bipolar.
It's a totally
Yeah.
different
But
yeah.
again, the other, a lesson, so to speak, is, at my age, I'm still open and wanting to learn those things. And I think if we all are open
Yeah.
and looking for areas to learn, we all will learn and understand each other better.
It's good. All right, let's talk about decision making here. Let's talk about just general approach to decision making, high stakes, uncertain situations. Just how do you
Yeah,
walk into that?
yeah, yeah. So I think every experience we had prior helps, I don't want to say fuel, but is the foundation for the next decision we're going to make.
Yeah.
And when you evaluate prior decisions made, even if it didn't work out the way you had hoped or wanted, there's still valuable lessons there, whether it was the process you went through or, how you approached it. So it's not always easy, but try and take the emotion out of the decision and just focus on the facts. Um, I heard a great interview with the comedian Bill Maher. He was interviewing Sean Penn, and they were talking about Quentin Tarantino. And Bill Maher said, "How can you have a conversation with that man? Because I never understand what he's talking about."
Yeah.
And Sean Penn said something very insightful. He says, "You got to listen to the melody, not the lyrics."
Ah,
I was like, "Oh, that's a really insightful." So when you're in that conversation, focus on the melody, not the lyrics, like the spirit of it. So you're not picking words apart and things on those lines and not emotional about it. And then really just, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but just challenge your opinion.
yeah.
Don't be afraid to have someone challenge your opinion. You should solicit that and want that because that helps you solidify what you're thinking or maybe helps you change what your opinion is. Um, and the other item that I think about when we go through decisions is we want to make an evaluation. We want to be thoughtful and take our time, but not have perfect be the enemy of great and not have paralysis by analysis, right? So have enough information, make an educated decision, and then go. Don't look back, don't second guess, but go. And then if it doesn't work out, make those, 1 degree pivots along the way. So that's some of the approach that we take internally.
Let's talk about personal growth. Obviously, we've talked a lot about surrounding ourselves with good people. Books are a key piece of that.
Mhm.
Anything? Is it books for you? Is it experiences? Just resources that have just been super helpful for you and influential.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. I've read more the last couple of years as the kids have gotten older and there's, less responsibility of, care for the kids, right? Less sports, less activities,
Yeah.
less school functions. So I certainly have read more. One of the books I read this year, which really had an impact on me, was called The Confident Mind. Dr. Zinzer, I think is his name, sports psychologist. And, prior we've talked about baseball, right? So, um, I took a mindset approach out of that was really helpful, which was Tony Gwynn, back in the 80s, early 90s, maybe the best pure hitter in the history of baseball. But in the late 80s, early 90s, he was on the forefront of video, and video wasn't a thing then. Today, you see players with iPads on the bench,
Yeah.
right? But video was not used at that time. And so he was interviewed about it, and they were asking what he does. I take all my at bats and I three categories: great, average, and bad. And the question was, what do you do? He said, I take the bad ones and I throw them away. I never watch them again. And I take the ones that were okay and I put them aside and I watch my good at bats and I watch them over and over and over again. And then the question was, well, why wouldn't you watch where you maybe swung and missed to improve? He said, I want to focus on what I did well and only focus on that and just
Wow.
constantly hardwire that into my brain so it becomes second nature. So that was something I never thought about before because I would have always considered myself a relentless improver and focusing on what didn't go well so we could be better and not acknowledging what we did well. And that's personal growth for me because I was not good at that for many years. And now I really do try and focus on that mindset of this is what we did well today. This is what we did well today, and keep doing more of it and just make that the focus and completely get away from the things that didn't go well.
I've never. I like that perspective. I've never heard it because
Yeah.
human nature is so. There's got to be a negative here. What's the negative? Let me go fix that negative. But
Hmm.
and we were talking about this a little bit before the call. There's certain things that once the human brain hears them so many times or after so many seconds, you can kind of convince your brain one way or another that like,
Hmm.
oh man, I do suck, or no, I am pretty good.
Yeah.
And that changes things for you.
Yeah. Old school Tony Robbins that I bought, and Tony Robbins has probably been going back to influences. He's probably been the core influence on my behavior the last 25 years. Um, so one of his core teachings is your brain will answer any question you ask it. The key is to ask it the right questions, right? So if you ask yourself, why am I so fat? Your brain will answer that question and it'll tell you every reason, that's negative. If you ask the question of what can I do today, right now, to improve my weight and have fun doing it and focus on that, your brain will answer that question. So that becomes a key is you influence your mindset by the questions you ask yourself. And at the end of the day, the only thing in life that we control is what we think about.
Yeah.
Everything else there's a counter influence on. The only thing that there is no counter influence on other than, narcotics or chemicals or,
Yeah.
a health disorder is what we think.
Yeah, I love it. We're getting deep. This is good. All right. I got a couple more for you here. Maybe
Please.
one or two more. Success, personal success, failures. Any instance maybe where one of these personal failures or just turned into a really great lesson or stepping stone to something better?
Yeah, yeah, yes. So one of our largest clients, Fortune 1000, a name most people would recognize, we had a major struggle with, call it end of 23, going into 24, probably summer 23, going into the end of the year last year. um, where just the way our audit works, the cost to us, the investment of time is high up front, and then you start generating revenue 6 months later, and our costs are much lower at that point because then it's just processing orders, not the heavy inventory build and research. And we were at that point where we were about to start being able to generate revenue, and we were this close to being like out and done. And it was really all internal at the client and nothing we did wrong. And there was a little nuance, a little thing that happened that I just jumped all over. And I made a bigger deal of it than needed to be made. But I used it from the perspective of never be afraid to have a difficult conversation. And that's another core thing we teach internally is we change the phrase difficult to be important, right? So it's not always like a negative, like difficult. It's just an important conversation. And I learned that years ago that no difficult discussion ever becomes easier with the passage of time, right? Like if you got to tell Adam something, right, and it's not good, it's
Yep.
not going to be easier tomorrow,
Nope. Nope. That
right?
just doesn't get better.
But that's a core human trait is just push it off, push it off, push it off. So don't push it off, address it. We did that. It was a bit of a heart to heart. It was a bit of a little bit of this
Yeah.
that respectfully I'm not afraid of because if you handle it professionally and appropriately,
Yeah.
you get past it. And like many fights you might have with a friend, you're that much closer afterwards. You laugh about it, and that's what happened. So again, I think the lesson, the personal success, the failure there was what we did didn't work.
Mm.
The success was addressing it and moving forward in a better spot and coming out the other side with a better relationship with the client,
It's good.
which today, a year later, is our largest client and some of the best work that we've done.
I love it. In the
Yeah.
moment, it gets so wild in those moments, but in hindsight, it just makes so much sense of like,
Yeah.
yeah, we did the
Yeah.
right thing and look how it benefits us now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, final thoughts here. So we're thinking legacy and impact. So if you look ahead, let's just call it look ahead 10 years, and you kind of then you're looking back. What's the impact that you want to feel like I made this impact either in this industry or as a leader of Prelude? What
Yeah.
final thoughts there?
Yeah. So prior to Prelude, my entire career was spent at providers, right? So that's part of what makes Prelude so good is a lot of us have that provider experience and that perspective we bring to the client side of the table. One thing that not even 5, 10 years from now, but today makes me happy, makes me feel good about the work I've done is at the summit, at channel partners, at whatever event you go to where the providers are there. Obviously with, the years under my belt, there's a there's a long line of people I've worked with,
Yeah.
right? Many of which I've hired, some of which I had to let go. But I feel good when people thank me for work that we did years ago or where I helped them either get a job or help them improve their job, or when they tell me things I said, like when I mentioned about Brian Love, my buddy, they tell me things that they do today that I taught them 10, 12, 15 years ago. So, you know, I don't think about legacy, so to speak. That's an area that makes me feel good. And I hope there's more of that, as time goes on. And, I say this very humbly, but I want people to look at me and say, that's a good dude. That's a solid dude right there. And if people say that, I'm happy.
I think that's where we wrap it, man. That's a good note. Man,
Be a solid dude. There's your headline. Be a
hey,
solid.
be a
That's it.
solid dude. Make
That's
good
it.
decisions. Have
That's it.
have important ones. I learned that
Yeah.
one today. That's a
Yeah.
good
It's the
one.
headline world. Be a solid dude. That's it.
I like it.
That's it.
It's good stuff, Bob. Thanks so much for coming on,
Thank
man.
you,
Really
Josh. This was
appreciate it.
great. I
Really
appreciate
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
All right, everybody, that wraps us up for today. As always, remember these things drop every Wednesday. You can hear all these great nuggets from Bob, hear them before anybody else does. I'm your host for today, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Teleris, Bob Healey, Chief Commercial Officer from Prelude, Business Blueprints, Lessons from Leaders. Until next time.
Thank you.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Teleris Studio 19. Please visit Teleris.com for more information.